And the increasing pressure internally there. We also have acclaimed journalist and newly acquainted friend of the show, Roya Hakakian, author of Assassins of the Turquoise Palace, an extraordinary perspective. We'll get starting right now. Congressman Welch, let's go to the most horrifying. They are killing people in Syria. There was obviously effort at the UN. Russia and China did not want to participate. We know the narrative over the weekend. We are seeing Russia selling more weapons 3 weeks ago to the Syrian government. We know that there is an economic relationship between Iran, Syria, Russia, and China as a cabal, effectively. Not that it's an evil conspiracy, by the way. We've got one with Saudi Arabia. Other people have them with other parts of the region for oil. But that is a relationship set. How do we help that man on that YouTube video not get killed?
Well, you know, I wish I had an answer. I mean, watching him and knowing what's happening, where literally the military is coming in with tanks in the neighborhoods. It would be like going into a small town in the U.S. and literally unloading this cannon fire in the homes where women, children, young men and women were. And what's our ability to stop that? Militarily, it doesn't seem as though there's a viable option. Obviously, the administration is doing everything it can diplomatically and through the UN. The Arab League supports the efforts that we're making and is condemning Assad. But at the end of the day, you have China and you have Russia standing in the way of any kind of UN resolution, and it's pretty frustrating.
Which means,
tragic.
Yeah, which means, Roya, we should focus our attention on those with the power. Russia and China clearly are the ones that are enabling the perpetuation of the Assad regime's murder of his own people. Is there anything that the world has in its leverage arsenal, Western Europe, South America, North America, whoever it may be, to exert more influence over China and Russia to prevent them from supporting this murderous regime?
That's a great question. Of course, they have everything at stake in preventing Russia and China in preventing this spread of democracy.
Why? What do they stand to lose?
Because they have then to answer to their own people why they're not allowing civil liberties and freedoms in their own country.
Slippery slope theory of their own government dysfunction.
Perfectly well put. I mean, the question for China is, when is Tiananmen going to return to China? And I think these are the things that they're preventing. More than economic interest, I think it's a question of their own survival and continued existence.
Yeah. Congressman, we've seen a global resistance developing not just with Mubarak and Tahrir Square, but around the world, obviously here in America with the occupation, and for that matter, aspects of the Tea Party, and for that matter, aspects of the Obama election, which is the rejection of two sets of rules.
Right.
It's a lizard brain. It's a behavioral economic rejection. Every country in the world, because there's new thresholds of shared information, is saying there's two sets of rules, and we reject that. How do we acknowledge that that's what's happening as opposed to pretending that's not what's happening as a political apparatus and as a planet?
Well, I mean, that is happening. I mean, you're just seeing the incredible reaction that has spread across the Middle East. I mean, the issue for us is to have a realistic way of engaging. Let's take Iran. In our trip, I went with Mr. Cantor and several Republicans, interestingly enough. The United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, in every one of these countries, massive concern about a nuclear Iran, enormous support for sanctions, but significant, sober caution about the use of military force. And now what we have to do is calibrate whether we'll be willing to be patient with these sanctions, or will we escalate into a rhetoric that walks us into a casting aside the kind of sober consideration that has to be used before you do take military action.
Roya, you were explaining to me right before we walked onto the set that the sanctions are having their intended effect, and that effect is being manifest by the summoning of Ahmadinejad to testify for the first time in 33 years before the parliament. Will you elaborate on that?
Precisely. I mean, this is the kind of thing that has never happened in the past 33 years, as you put. And I think, you know, next week, Iran will be celebrating the 33rd anniversary of the 1979 revolution, with a lot of things still in question for the public since the 2009 stolen elections. I mean, Ahmadinejad came back to power, seeming like his relationship with the supreme leader was very strong. It is no longer so, and promising to bring out a middle class that was on dwindling inside the country, and so it has not been able. He has not been able to strengthen the country economically. economically. And in the meantime, we also know that the dissatisfactions that brought people to the streets in 2009 have not been addressed.
Congressman Welch, what do the American people need to understand to be more effective in helping advocate American policy and politics around the Middle East, specifically to this sort of unifying thesis of all societies rejecting two sets of rules, many of which are sort of very on display over in that part of the world?
Well, you know, you put it very simply, and I think it's as simple as that. We support democracy. We support the peacemakers in all of these countries that are trying to create a civil society that recognizes rights for women and all the members of their society. And the question for the U.S., particularly in Congress, is will we continue and try to be a constructive presence? Will we try to make things better, or will we descend into political rhetoric where we're trying to one-up one another and get off the track of trying to make a constructive contribution to a positive outcome?
Well, obviously that's what's going to happen, Congressman.
It's happening.
You just answered the question. We know what's going to happen, which is I'm going to be like, I'm tougher than you. I'll do this. And you'll be like, no, I'll do this. And we'll just yell at each other. It'll be great.
That's exactly right. And that's why, frankly, you've got to give the administration some latitude, because these things are not going to be solved by one member of Congress trying to one-up the other about who's the toughest. And we saw when we went to war in Iraq, there was an awful lot of that kind of discussion.
Yeah.
You know, the military option may be something that has to be on the table. But if it's on the table, we don't need to talk about it all the time. We have a military that if we give them the order, will do the job we give them to do.
Tell the truth, Congressman. The congressmen from Vermont are the toughest. Right? Come on. You could say it.
You said it.
Peter Welch, thank you very much for the conversation. Roya, it's a delight to see you.
Thank you.
And I hope to see you sooner rather than later. Roya Hakakian, Assassins at the Turquoise Palace, and you can find Congressman Welch being tough in Vermont year-round, I'm sure. Up next, just because you ignore it does not